Hello and welcome to the board. Happy New Year to all of you out there watching us now. My name is Paul Llewellyn. I'm an Agile coach here at Boost. These are my colleagues Gavin Coughlin.
Gavin Coughlin is my name.
Something's never changed though, Gavin.
And
I'm Kirstin.
Donaldson.
Thanks for joining us and Happy New Year to everybody out there who's watching.
Yes.
I believe a couple of people. Today we're going to focus on New Year's resolutions in our Scrum working lives. And this has been prompted by a blog that Paul found yesterday when he was having a look around by Mike Cohen, where he's listed some of his New Year's resolutions in regards to his work. So we thought we'd start off first by having a chat about the things that he's identified he wants to work on, and then we'll move on to the things that we've identified we'd like to work on.
All right,
great.
Sounds good to me. So that post by Mike Cohen, you came across it. So what are his 2014 resolutions?
He was reaching out to Scrum Masters and product owners in particular, and he gave two resolutions he suggested for Scrum Masters and two resolutions.
I think they're for himself though.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
But
but the suggested ideas.
They're good resolutions. I think they're things that a lot of people should take on board.
So always let the team go first in meetings, or have the first say.
Yeah,
he was saying this basically because he finds it very hard. He admits he's quite opinionated and finds it hard not to jump in when he's got an idea of how things should go. So what he's saying is let the team have their first.
He mentioned waiting with your idea until two team members have put their ideas forward.
That's right.
I think for people who have been developers in the past, this is particularly pertinent because they might have opinions about how things should be done. Personally, when I read that, I thought it's not something I generally have a problem with in Scrum meetings because I don't know much about what they're talking about, so I don't have opinions. So it's the only time I would really offer an opinion is if the conversation had been going on a little while and I would say something like, maybe we should discuss this offline or make a story about it.
Yeah.
But obviously for you, Paul, you're an ex-developer, so did this sort of resonate with you?
Yeah, definitely, and it's particularly hard when you're fulfilling that dual role of Scrum Master and developer on the same team, because you often jump in with, because you have opinions as a developer. But the problem is that if you're fulfilling a dual role, team members don't often know which hat you've got on. So are you in the authority position? They perceive Scrum Master as being an authority position, even though it's not. And then the problem with that is then they think you're telling them what to do, and it's not the case.
So for you though, how does that work in a meeting? I mean, do you see yourself as having input as a developer?
No,
not at all. So you're purely Scrum Master.
I'm purely a Scrum Master now.
Well, that's true because you don't do any of the development work now. But previously, when you were Scrum Mastering and doing development work, how did that work for you?
It was hard. I had to keep my mouth shut. I realised that I was, because my opinions aren't always that great anyway. So. And other teams.
It's very humble of you.
I think it's so true. I think other team members had more valid opinions. So let's hear the room. It's especially important, particularly one of the team who's quite quiet. It was a real effort, and we as a team had to make a decision around getting him to speak up and encouraging him to speak up. So
I think that you not speaking at all though is denying a team member's input, don't you think? If you were doing development
work. Yeah. I think Mike's got the right attitude though. Is just wait for a couple of people to share their opinions first.
I like that. One thing that Mike Cohen didn't mention to me, somebody else did ages ago, and it was a bit of a revelation for me, is the power of silence in a meeting. Sometimes you go into a meeting and you feel compelled to fill all the silences. We're talking to direct things quite a lot, but sometimes it's a good idea just to be brave enough to allow there to be silence, to sit down, just wait for somebody to talk. So if somebody is quiet and they're reluctant to put their ideas forward and to get started, if you're just silent and wait for them, eventually they'll have to chime in, and it's quite a useful thing in a lot of meetings, especially if somebody else has called a meeting and you arrive and you sit down and you just wait for them to talk. It's it really gets people motivated and started.
And when the silence becomes really uncomfortable, you can chime in with things like, so who wants to go first?
Yes, exactly. And then for me that was a bit of a revelation, because I thought silences were a terrible thing in meetings, and I'd avoid them at all costs, and I just fill it in with conversation that wasn't always the most valuable conversation. But if you just wait, people get to the point a lot quicker. So
absolutely.
And I mean, it's kind of a difficult thing to do because nobody likes that. That sense of silence.
There's this. I was just thinking about a case incident just before Christmas where we were trying to encourage someone to speak up in a situation that was quite uncomfortable for them. We were trying to. It was that we were using the opposite day or the opposite sprint.
Oh yes, yeah.
And he really didn't want to. Well, we were talking particularly about a training course we were doing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think he wanted to say the opposite of how he felt about the course because because it was so bad.
Yes.
And
his opinion.
His opinion was good. But he had to reverse it and say the opposite.
Oh, right, and he wasn't comfortable with saying something so
he
negative.
Wasn't comfortable with saying something negative. So in that case, I gave him an example of what he could say just to get the ball rolling.
And just so you know what Paul's talking about there, sometimes when we're doing retrospectives at the start of it, when we're doing the check-in phase of retrospectives, we do something that we call the opposite sprint, where you get somebody to, just in a sentence, describe how they felt the last sprint went, except they have to reverse it, say the opposite. And we've done it recently on some training courses where we say at the end of, when we're talking about retrospectives, we give an example of a check-in and we say, so how do you feel this training course went? But we want you to tell us the opposite of how you felt it went.
Yeah, it's a really good way to get people to share information.
Yeah,
really,
and it's
because it makes them laugh.
Yeah, it's very funny. Yeah, because when we did that training course in December, there's quite a large. I think one of the groups we had was 17 people.
Yeah,
I went around all 17 people, and they were saying things like, "I felt this course had absolutely no value, and the presenters were really dull."
Does that feel weird hearing that?
Even
though you know it's opposite day.
It makes you smile and
Does it? It would make me dismayed until I remembered.
Yeah.
All you have to do is reverse it in your head, and then realise that they're saying that they would have, that you were great. And
that's a really good.
It was valuable.
I find that's a really good check-in because, like you said, it's a little bit lighthearted.
Yeah,
and obviously it's a good way of getting everybody talking as well.
That's right.
So Mike Cohen's other point that he wanted to improve on in 2014 was praising the team.
Yeah. So as a scrum master, praise the team more often.
So he mentioned that he quite often talks to his team about improving. So, for example, if their velocity has risen, he says things like, "That's great, but can we raise it even further?"
Yeah.
So what he's trying to remind himself is to just leave it at "That's fantastic." Kind of.
It's interesting. He describes himself as a glass half
full,
glass half empty. Kind of guy.
Yeah.
And so it's that continuous improvement mentality. So when even though you're seeing obvious improvement, there's better or there's more can be done. Which
is great, but obviously he needs to temper that with making the team fully appreciate that it's praise.
Yeah.
So perhaps just leaving it at that's great.
Yeah, because it would be disheartening if you say, "Hey, Scrum Master, we've cut down our defects by 50%," and their response is, "Why is that not 100%?"
Yeah,
it's just not a good way to motivate people.
Even if you say, "Oh, that's really fantastic, but why isn't it better?" It's still kind of negating the compliment of the first half of the sentence.
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, it's really great to focus on improvements, but perhaps Mike Cohen or other people could focus on separating those two things out.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, do you remember we were talking about that tennis coach from the 70s or 80s? Do either of you guys remember that conversation? And he wrote a very good book, and the reason his book was so successful is because he focused entirely on the positive aspects of the person he was coaching.
Oh, right.
And not the negative. So he would encourage people to, if they had a great forehand, he would say great forehand. He wouldn't tell them they had a terrible backhand. So
he'd focus on their strengths rather than weaknesses.
Yeah, absolutely, because he realised that if you tell them they had a terrible backhand, all they would think about was their terrible backhand.
Like
even when they were doing their great forehand, they would be thinking,
"Oh, it's going to colour their strengths as well as."
That's right. But his opinion was that if you focused on people's strengths, then their weaknesses would catch up,
right?
Or pick up,
Yeah, that's something to think about, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's one of the. I wish I could. I'll dig out the title of the book and we'll put it up afterwards because it's one of the it feeds into the sort of coaching stance approach where you treat everybody naturally creative, resourceful, and whole. And which is one of my New Year's resolutions, by the way, but we'll talk about that later.
And by the way, if you want to look at Mike Cohen's blog post that we're talking about today, it's at, what's the URL? It's Mountain Goat Software.
Should we put that up afterwards?
Yeah, we'll put that up afterwards.
Yeah, we put the URL up
after.
This is
Mountain Goat.
This is blog on Mountain Goat, Cool.
So those were his two resolutions from a Scrum Master's point of view, I suppose, but he also talked about some resolutions for his role as a product owner.
That's right.
Yeah. So they were
to redirect the team less often.
Yes.
I've actually forgotten the detail of that one. Paul, can you
So
remember?
what he's talking about here is encouraging the product owners, and you have great ideas, and you realise when you see things in progress, especially when you start to see bits of working software, you suddenly got something tangible, and you think, yeah, this would be great, and we can do this, and we can do that, and the temptation is to go to the team and say, to start changing the story,
and
start changing their sprint,
them from what they're
distract
doing.
them from what they're doing, and essentially he's saying, so that's great to have those ideas. Now write them down, make them a story, put them on the backlog, do something useful. Don't distract the team from what they're currently doing. The idea with the sprint mentality is that we try to keep that as set in stone as possible. I don't know if that's the correct phrase. I'm trying to think.
I think it's probably a fairly good phrase, because you do want that sprint backlog not to be changed during the sprint, ideally, right? So,
but I think one of the things he was highlighting is that it's great to have ideas, but let's capture them in a way that's not going to be distracting to the work of the team.
That's absolutely, yeah.
So,
redirect the team within. So, what they from have a point where you can redirect them after they've finished the work they're currently working on. Then
because those conversations still need to happen, because they're quite inspiring when you're working on a project to talk about new ideas that are coming up, aren't they?
And
that's right.
He mentioned that part of the reason why product owners might redirect the team a lot is because they've got this idea and they want to get it out, and so they present it to the team. But if you do just capture it in the backlog, that's still your idea getting out there, and that's enough to satisfy your need to get the idea out there, and it's in the backlog, and it's it is captured, and it's not going to be forgotten.
Yeah, and we often run a product backlog refinement session. To
nice use of the new word.
The new Scrum guidelines use the word refinement, and so we often run the refinement session so that the team can discuss those new ideas with us in a controlled sort of fashion, if you like.
It's the appropriate place to do it.
Because one, it's distracting if a product owner comes over to a team member and starts going on about their latest, greatest idea, and two, the team member, if they're working on that story currently that feeds into that, then they might start thinking about that, and they start instead of doing the simplest thing they can to achieve the current objective,
that's right.
They start
trying to accommodate the new idea.
Actually, this is slightly off topic a little bit, but what's your feelings on a backlog refining meeting? Because I just started up a project, and I've immediately scheduled a backlog refining meeting halfway through the sprint, because I think it's such a valuable meeting. It's really worthwhile, and I know it's not specified. I just thought it would be a really good idea in this case to begin it straight away, so we can talk about the rest of the stories in the backlog. What's your feeling on that? Do you say when you're starting up a project, do you schedule in backlog grooming sessions?
I do, especially it doesn't always need to have the team present. You can just work with the key people, like the product owner and the business analyst, or whoever's writing the stories. I mean, the product owner's obviously got to prioritise the stories. It's usually the product owner who's involved, but there's also subject matter experts and so on. And so it's just initially it might be the Scrum Master coaching the product owner on how to write stories.
I think though in the case of this particular project, it's a great idea to get the product owner interacting with the team as much as possible, and that's one way of doing it. In a way that they're sort of committed to, rather than having to remember. And hopefully then it will become more natural to involve the person on a daily basis. On the particular project you're talking about, the client is in our office at the moment, which is fantastic. And we need to find ways to remind the team to
interact.
And that's just another good way of having them talk to each other and become more comfortable with that.
Absolutely.
I mean, I think the refinement meeting is definitely it's important that the team see the stories ahead of their sprint planning session. To allow, they recommend at least one sleep on a story before you actually have to come.
Just one what?
One sleep.
One sleep.
That means one night between.
Okay.
Working on it. Like sleeps before Christmas.
Oh yes, of course.
So that you can
don't sleep.
So you actually can chew you've got some thought process around that story before you have to commit to
lateral thinking in the shower.
That's right.
Okay. And I suppose that brings us sort of on to another one of Mike Cohen's resolutions for the product owner. We've just been talking about the product owner
yeah.
being available, and we have somebody working here at Boost at the moment on a laptop, so they're there for the team whenever they need to show them something or ask them a question. And yeah, one of my Cohen's resolutions is to be more available as a product owner to the team.
Yeah,
and I suppose
he has made the suggestion of being co-located for set periods and to let the team know exactly when those periods will be, if you can't be there all the time.
That's right.
Which is ideal to have the people actually in the room.
Yeah.
But his other idea was to have people have a code word for email, wasn't it?
That's right. So put a code word in the subject line.
So, for example, today, for things that need to be answered today in order to not impede progress. But also to coach the team on inappropriate use of the today code word. Yeah.
So the idea around, say, something like today was that there's an agreement, a working agreement between the product owner and the team, that if they get a subject line on an email with today in it, then they would respond by the end of the day, or in whatever the end of the day meant for that team. And so, as Kirstin said, the temptation is then to write every single email that you write to the product owner with the subject today. Which obviously is just going to kill that.
Yeah, it's like marking all your bugs as critical, or
equal priority.
And I can't remember where we were, but we were talking to somebody about Scrum. They just wanted to know more about it, and you and I went in and talked to them about it. And somebody asked me the question: in your experience, what is the biggest issue you've had in projects that you've used Scrum on? And it was a pretty easy one to answer. And I think. What were you going to say?
No, I was just trying to think. I mean, obviously I wasn't there for the question.
So
it's an interesting question.
So I said the most common issue I've seen in Scrum projects is the product owner not being available, and that's one thing that's really hampered the project.
That's true.
So sometimes it's that they're not available, and sometimes it's just that they have been shoved in there and really don't have the authority or even the knowledge to make decisions. So it's such a pivotal role. And it's we do, like we said, we have a product owner working here at the moment, and the team, they don't approach them every 10 minutes or anything, but when they have decisions, whether it's wireframing decisions or just decisions they're making with the development, they're able to go over and have that decision made within 5 minutes, as opposed to maybe emailing somebody or trying to get somebody on the phone and having that blocked for maybe an hour or even longer sometimes if the product owner is not available. So it's really essential to have them around. So for me, that's the biggest problem I've seen in Scrum projects.
I agree. I think the absolute worst thing I've ever heard is when we've heard it here, is you're the experts, you build it. Because
it's a red flag, isn't it?
We are the experts, but it's not our product, and we don't know what that. It's your product. It's the product owner's product. So we
do need to be involved.
Yeah.
Well, we did have that situation a long time ago, and a client said exactly that: you're the experts, you build it, and they just wanted to go away and come back, and it was done. But we didn't know the product intimately at all, and we're not the best.
The users of the product,
and the point being is there's many variations on a theme, and so how would we know what to build without some collaboration?
So what was the outcome of that particular project? Did we sort of push back and say no, you have to be involved, or did we do it the way they want?
We pushed back and
educated.
It didn't necessarily work there. It didn't really work
because the person is perhaps not committed from the outset by the sound of
it. They just didn't want to be involved at all. They didn't want to come to stand-ups. They didn't want to be around to answer questions. They literally did not want to be involved at all. So what we built for them at the end met all the requirements, but it didn't really meet the need, or it didn't fix the problem that they were trying to solve.
So it didn't really match up with their vision. That's what I imagine would have happened on that, but because if they're not going to share their vision regularly. Can't hope to match that and live up to it.
And it's one of the risks that the white paper that Nathan wrote recently on risk. It's in there as one of the 4 major risks of any project. The fact that you don't have involvement with the person who has the vision. Because you can't build a vision without you can't build their vision unless they're available.
And so
I was just to interject slightly. I just want to remind everyone that we're really happy to take questions via the text here.
Yep.
If anyone has any comments about product ownership in this way, or even just about
or New Year's resolutions.
Or New Year's
if you have New Year's
resolutions that
resolutions
they've been thinking about work-wise.
pertinent to Agile, yeah.
Yeah, the personal ones, not so much, but
I'd be interested in some of the personal ones.
Gavin's interested. So please feel free to chip
more
in,
sorted, the better. And Mike Cohen's last resolution is
in general. This is applicable to
yes,
the
for
whole team.
everybody. Yep.
Sorry.
This would be a good one, I suppose, in any part of your life. But obviously, in terms of just working in an agile way, is to constantly improve, and use the word Kaizen there, which does mean constant improvement. Yeah.
Kaizen actually means simple change.
Oh, you're right.
Right, I knew you were going to contradict him.
But most people take it to mean continuous improvement.
So that's good to know actually. That
yeah, it comes from the Toyota way.
Yeah.
Or the Toyota production systems.
Yeah.
They mean it in the context of continuous improvement, constant simple change.
Yeah, and we're agile coaches, and Kirstin, you're general manager
and an agile coach sometimes.
So I mean that resolving to continuously improve throughout the years.
I think it's applicable to everybody, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
So should we move on to our resolutions?
Yes, we should do.
I'm going to start with mine because it's the first on our prompt board over here.
Okay.
And it's to ask more powerful questions. So part of my work for this year is to work on becoming more of a democratic leader rather than being a command and control type leader. And one of the techniques for that is to look at asking people powerful questions rather than giving them solutions.
Yeah.
So if someone comes to me and asks me what should I do in this situation, I'm going to work on asking them questions such as the first one that springs to mind that we use quite often is well what's possible, to prompt them to think of something that's going to work for them and the situation, rather than me to immediately say, well, you should do this, because I'm not involved in that work generally, and I may not be the best person to provide that answer. So I think last year we did an interesting exercise that you'd learned from your coach.
I was being coached for a while by Jeff Watts, who was really fantastic, and he has a book out about Scrum Mastering, which I believe is very good. I haven't read it yet, though. And he talked to me about this exercise, and I brought it here to Boost, and we tried it. And it was a good exercise. I'd like to do a few more times, actually. And it's called, what did he call it? I think he called it hot seating. And you get a few people together, and you get one person to talk for a minute about anything. It can be a work-related issue that they're having, or a personal issue that they're having. It can be any sort of an issue that person really feels that they can talk about for a minute, and then they stop after that. And then the people around them, and this is just a training exercise, so you'll have a few people, you might have 4 people or something, want to ask them a question. They'll think of a powerful question, so it usually takes people a few, don't just blurt something out because you feel pressure to blurt something out, but have a think about it.
So blurt is a technique as well, and I think during that session I distinctly recall doing a blurt.
Oh yes.
Which is just saying whatever's top of mind in order to provoke the person to think.
Yeah, and I think so you try to ask them a powerful question, and then you get feedback from everybody about what they thought about that question, and the feedback from the person that you asked the question to, and of course everybody has different ideas what a powerful question is. For me, it's a powerful question. A powerful question is something that makes someone really stop and think, and they go, oh, and they really have to think about their answer. It's not something they're able just to get out there really quickly.
So it can be something quite specific, like for example, what would happen if this happened in this situation? So that makes them think about the issue from a different angle. But it is quite hard to do, because quite often when you're practicing exercises like this, you just end up putting a solution in the question, and then you generally get feedback from everyone else that maybe that wasn't an appropriate, powerful question. So I'd be really interested in practicing that again. Were you there for that session, Paul? I think you might have been in the UK at the time.
Yeah, I think I was.
Yeah, so we should do it again soon. So
yeah, sure, that'd be great.
Because we do some sessions to try and help each other become better coaches, and that was for me one of the the simpler things with the least pressure involved as well, because there's a group thing.
It was, and the only thing that difficult in that session was that we weren't allowed to actually discuss that person's issue any further, and everyone was sort of burning to delve into it a bit deeper.
It's not about the issue, it's about
it's really about just formulating the question, and it was great to get that feedback on the questions though, as well, particularly from the person who'd talked about the issue.
Well, my resolution for 2014 is to been doing a lot of training in 2013, and Paul and I quite often do it together. Kirstin, sometimes you and I do it, and it's just very satisfying. It's great going into a group of people who want to change or willing to change, want to learn how to change.
It's quite fun with the skeptical people as well, isn't it?
It is actually, and there's always skeptical people in there.
Well, surprisingly, like not as skeptical as I expect. Like sometimes people, we sometimes get warnings up front about someone who's super skeptical, and then it always turns out to be less skeptical than I imagined.
Absolutely.
And so and I welcome the different opinions. The challenging questions really keep you on your toes.
Yeah, absolutely. So I suppose my resolution in that field is to be a better trainer and to put together really great courses for people, and courses that are specifically tailored to those people, and to leave those people feeling inspired to change, and some ideas about how they can actually start that process as well.
So again, I guess we're referring to continuous improvement here for you.
Absolutely. So
because you're already pretty good from the feedback I've seen. So.
Well, I just want to get better and better at that, and there's there's always room for improvement. I believe that, and everything.
So I was just trying to do a praise without a improvement. Then.
Brilliant. It felt odd with at odds with our usual interaction. But that's basically mine in a nutshell, to just get a lot better in that and to keep learning about that.
One of my resolutions is to treat everybody as, or try to start treating everybody as naturally creative, resourceful and whole. And this is comes from the coaching stance, or coactive coaching, where you if you treat everybody as naturally creative, resourceful and whole, then you honestly believe that they have the answers, and you don't need to give them the answer. And so that's one of the key things is in sort of the coaching stance, is allowing people to come up with solve their own problems. Come up with the answers.
And having that thought in mind,
empower them.
Naturally leads you to encourage them to come up with their own solutions rather than dictating them.
That's right. And the reality is that you don't hold everybody naturally creative, resourceful and whole, because you often have you often have judgments around people. Talking to my coach about this, saying that he can't treat his children as naturally creative, resourceful and whole, because that they're only small. They haven't fully
they're not whole yet.
They haven't fully formulated their like worldview and all that.
They're idiots, right?
But his next statement was, well, I am being coached about this.
Because they are, but just in a different way.
In a totally different way. That's right.
And just because they don't behave like adults doesn't mean that they're not naturally, whatever your phrase was, creative and whole.
What I really like about this is that every coach does have a coach, and the fact that my coach has a coach, and so on. There's a constant.
The eternal circle of coaches.
It makes complete sense though, because if you're going to practice what you preach, then you should be constantly improving, and to do that you need help.
That's right. You need a sandboard to continuously improve.
I mean it's really part of teamwork, isn't it? You need a team behind you and a coach for that team.
And I think that's a great resolution, Paul, because it is immensely satisfying to see that happen, to see a team really start to feel, take that responsibility for themselves, and you start to see them, feel empowered and actually making their own decision. It's hugely satisfying to see that happen.
It's the key to a less stressful life, isn't it? Being able to, have a team that is really self-managing.
That's
just a very positive thing to be a part of, really.
It's sort of win-win for everybody, isn't it?
Totally. So did you have any other resolutions, Kirstin? Were you?
Well, I mean, it was more related to my work, which is to delegate more and not assume that I can do everything. Because obviously I'm not always the best person to do everything, but that's part of my personality. I think I am. So one of the things I'll be concentrating on as a wider company, but could be applicable to Scrum as well, is to not try and take on everything.
So I'll be interested to watch that.
You'll be involved in that.
Yes. I'm about to be delegated to quite a lot. Okay, fantastic.
One of my others is to, it comes up quite a lot, and we mentioned it today, was focusing on what's possible and not getting bogged down in the impossible, because the impossible is impossible. Very hard, at least.
That's something that's really interesting, because can be a very frustrating conversation when people that you were speaking with are always talking about what they can't do.
Yeah, that's right.
We can't do that because, and we can't do that because.
Yeah.
Exactly. Because barriers.
That's the objections.
And I often, as a developer, you in the old mode of working, you often had to identify what the barriers were as soon as possible.
Yeah.
But the barriers weren't really. We didn't really know if the barriers were real until we hit them. And so the point being that you can often come up with solutions to work around barriers. You have to look at what's possible, and it's just a change in mindset, because you are often asked for what wasn't possible, what won't work. And so coaching developers into that mindset. Luckily, there's lots of young guys, girls coming up from university who don't have that old mindset, and they fully understand the Agile approach.
It's interesting because looking at what's not possible is not really in the spirit of just-in-time working, is it?
No.
Because if you were doing just-in-time working, you would only encounter what's not possible as it came up, rather than being asked to address a list of those prior to really delving into it. It's really wasted work, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is wasted work. Big upfront design, and then the other, it's the whole thing with the Yagni principle. You ain't going to need it. You just don't know whether it's going to be applicable. Yeah,
you don't know whether it's going to be an issue. It's really quite wasteful to sit around thinking about what might happen.
Yeah. Interestingly, we'll probably keep this for another show, but there is a model that called Gavin that looks at ways it categorises problems, or it's a sense-making model. So it tells you, it gives you an idea of what space you're working in, what kind of problem you're trying to solve, and how you should best go about solving it.
Yeah, it's definitely something we could look into perhaps next time. I would have to read quite a bit more about it to talk about it, but in the meantime, but we'll be back in 2 weeks, so perhaps we can have a look at that then. And thanks for joining us, everyone.
Yep, thanks for joining us. And if you do, you can still, we're going to put this up on YouTube as well. If you want to let us know your resolutions for the year, please do.
Yeah, we'd love to see some comments on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks, and see you next time.
See you next time.